Next, the Invaders in color. The Invaders, alien beings from a dying planet. Their destination, the Earth. Their purpose, to make it their world. David Vincent has seen them. For him, it began one lost night on a lonely country road looking for a shortcut that he never found. It began with a closed, deserted diner and a man too long without sleep to continue his journey. It began with the landing of a craft from another galaxy. Now David Vincent knows the invaders are here, that they've taken human form. Somehow he must convince a disbelieving world that the nightmare has already begun. That's the introduction to one of my favorite science fiction TV shows from the 1960s, The Invaders, starring Roy Thinnis as architect David Vincent, and more guest stars than I could possibly list, but I'm going to list some of them. Anthony Burgess, Gene Hackman, Michael Rennie, Dabney Coleman, Susan Oliver, Anne Francis, Joanna Pettit, Suzanne Plachette, Edward Andrews, Diane Baker, Diana Muldaur and Barry Morse, Kent Smith, Alfred Ryder, Shirley Knight, Barbara Luna, Joseph Campanella, Jack Lord, Jack Warden, Norman Fell, Nancy Wickwire, Joanna Pettit, Ed Begley, Joanna Linville, Laura Devon, Catherine Justice, Harold Gould, Lawrence Naismith, John Larch, Susan Strasberg, Diana Hyland, James Whitmore, Robert Walker Jr., who played Charlie X in Star Trek, Lynn Loring, who would marry eventually Roy Thinnis, Peter Graves, Strother Martin, Dawn Wells, Peggy Lipton, Ralph Bellamy, Antoinette Bauer, Nan Martin. I could go on, but I'm not going to. Basically, everybody who was big in television was on this show at least once or twice. Some of the writers were some of the luminaries in science fiction at the time. Jerry Saul, George Eckstein, John W. Block, Theodore Sturgeon, Lawrence Heath, Dan Ullman, Meyer Dolinsky, and a number of others. A really good series. Directors, again, some famous people. Joseph Sargent, who I recognize from Combat and some of those types of shows, The Rat Patrol. Paul Wendkos, Richard Benedict, Sutton Rowley, John Meredith Lucas, who also directed and wrote a couple of Star Trek episodes, Richard Benjamin, a number of other really good directors, and was produced, of course, by the great Quinn Martin. Interesting story about Quinn Martin. Quinn Martin was not known to visit the sets of the shows that he produced. He trusted his directors and writers and actors to produce the types of shows that he wanted, and he didn't interfere a lot. But there was one exception on The Invaders. He was on set one day, and a very curmudgeonly old cameraman was apparently harassing one of the younger cameramen, saying, "Oh, you guys don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to set up the shot properly, blah, blah, blah." He was just going on and on, like, hammering away on this guy. And since he wasn't really well known, he walked up to this guy and he said, "You're fired." The guy said, "Who are you? You can't fire me." He says, "Oh, yes, I am. I'm Quinn Martin. Get off my set." So he did, in fact, take an interest in the Invaders. I believe there is a shot in the opening episode called Beachhead in which you can see him in the background. But that's, I think, the only time he actually did, and he didn't mean to do a cameo. He just was on set again that day. Very interesting show. Like I said, the premise is fairly simple and is explained there in that intro. Architect Roy Vincent is on a trip, and he accidentally sees the landing of a flying saucer. The people who get out are basically humanoid, but they're not human. There's something strange about them. They seem to glow red at certain points, and one of them has a bent pinky finger, sort of like this, which doesn't move, and that's an indication that throughout the series that somebody's an invader if they can't move their pinky finger, though not all of them were like that. There are some terrific episodes. There are 43. I'm not going to go over all of them because that would take far too much time. I'm just going to highlight some of the ones I really like. In the opening episode, Beachhead, David Vincent sees the UFO and he's trying to convince people that it was real. He brings people back to see it, and the diner that he originally went up to was called Bud's Diner. It's closed. And then when he brings the cops back and his business partner, it's changed. It's now Kelly's diner. And I've always wondered if Ron Leavitt and Dan Moy, the people who created Married with Children, were making an in-joke when they named the Bundy children Bud and Kelly, because that's the two different names of the diners. Apparently, they say they didn't. They say they named them after the children of some friends of theirs. But I still wonder. Um, the Vincent tries to convince people. They don't believe him. He goes back to his home and somebody throws a Molotov cocktail and he's almost killed. He escapes and he goes to this little town called Kinney, somewhere in California, up around Bakersfield. And so there's some odd goings on. The town seems to be abandoned. They've apparently sold all of it to a development company. And everybody's left except a couple of people like Diane Baker, who's the proprietress of a hotel where he stays, and he eventually finds out that she's an invader as well. And he sees one of the facilities, including he sees, for the first time, these things that they refer to as regeneration tubes. The aliens, in order to retain their human appearance, have to regenerate every 24 hours. And when they do this, they go into these tubes and they glow red. The tubes are also capable of giving a human being a heart attack and it makes it look natural. And this happens to David's partner, and he's very upset about that. He can't really convince anybody because one of the underlying premises, of course, of the show is that everybody thinks that people who sees UFOs as a nut or a crackpot, and they don't believe him. So the ending is kind of inconclusive. Now he's on this quest. He has to prove the invaders are real and try to stop this invasion, and that's the premise of pretty much every show. It carried on. It did some really interesting. One of my favorite episodes is the third one. It's called The Mutation. That's the one that stars Edward Andrews and Suzanne Pleshette. Edward Andrews plays a newspaper reporter who's become interested in this stripper who works in a little club in Arizona somewhere on the border of Mexico. And he thinks that she's an invader, and he's trying to convince David Vincent that she's an invader. It turns out that he's one too. And the thing is that she is a different kind of invader. She's a mutation. She has some emotions, though not all emotion. That's proven in a scene where they're in a small restaurant and there's a grease fire and a boy's arm is badly burned. And Vincent instantly goes to help him, and he puts out the grease fire with a towel. And Suzanne Pleshette just sits there with a completely emotionless look on her face. She doesn't care that this boy, is almost very badly burned. So she does not have empathy, though she does apparently have the emotions of, love and sensuality and seduction. She also reveals to Vincent, and this is a key plot point, that when the invaders are killed on Earth, they burn up, they scorch. That was done with an optical printer. What they would do is they would shoot the scene with the actor or actress, and then they would have them go off the set, and they'd send the film to a photographic laboratory, and they would matte in a red glowing figure over the actor, and that worked very well. All the special effects at this time, there was no CGI, there were no computers. They had to do everything by, optically. And given the limitations of that, they did some really good effects. The flying saucer effect was interesting because the upper portion of the saucer that you see when it's flying, is a matte. It's a matte painting. But the legs were real. They built the legs. So when you're climbing up into the flying saucer from the landing legs, those are physical. But the interior and the upper portion were either sets or matte paintings. And surprisingly, that worked very well. As did the effects of the laser guns, which are obviously chroma key plus the special effect shots that were added. One of my other favorite episodes, I'm not going to review all of them, I'm just going to review some of the better ones, in my opinion, was called Vicar with Jack Lord. This, I think, is the fourth episode. That's the first one where you actually see the regeneration tubes in use by the aliens, and a lineman accidentally sees two aliens regenerating. Jack Lord plays a guy called Vicar, who is Michael Vicar, I think his name is, and he owns a company and he has agreed to build regeneration tubes for the aliens in return for a position of power when they effect their takeover of the Earth. He's going to be given a position of power, he thinks. So he's told by one of the aliens who is played by Alfred Ryder, who is called Mr. Nexus, and he appears as different aliens in 3 different episodes. He's very menacing. He was a very good actor. Um, his wife, Diana Hyland, is something of a drunk, and she's pulled over for drunk driving, and her license is suspended. So David Vincent, who's heard of this incident where the guy saw what he thought was a burning man, uh, goes to visit this company, Vicar Electronics, and he gets himself hired as a chauffeur using a phony name for Diana Hyland. And at first, she kind of resents him, and but later on, he takes her into his confidence about what's really going on and about the invaders and their plot. And Jack Lord finds out about this, and the invaders, basically Alfred Ryder, insist that they get rid of his wife, and so he is going to kill her with, he knocks her out, and he opens the gas valves, and he's going to gas her to death. Vincent stumbles onto this and saves her, and now he does something very clever. He turns the tables on Jack Lord by placing a phone call that alleges that Jack Lord is really working with the government against the invaders, and that kind of seals his fate, and they kill him. Very interesting. He's an embittered Korean War veteran who's really only goes in with the invaders because he's resented, and he couldn't get a job when he came out of the war, even though they gave him all these medals, because they thought somebody with a metal plate in his head wasn't a good investment. And so he had to use apparently, illegal means to set up his business. Very well done. Jack Lord does a terrific job, as does Diana Hyland, who later appears in another really great episode, Summit Meetings Part 1 and 2. Um, Another episode I really like, which is the one that stars Ed Begley and Nancy Wickwire and Laura Devon, centers around a plot by the invaders. They're using a disused oil tanker railroad car that's on a sidetrack of Ed Begley's oil production field, and they're conducting secret meetings inside this hollowed out tank car where they have some scientific equipment. Vincent, again, is hired as an architect to help build some wells, and he stumbles onto this, and he's curious because 2 security guards died of cerebral hemorrhages, and they were both young and healthy. The invaders have a device, which this really scared me when I was a kid, even though it's a very simple thing. They have a disc, a metal disc that has glowing little orbs on it, that they touch you on the neck, you instantly die of a brain hemorrhage. And it looks like natural causes, so they can't prove anything. Vincent becomes aware of this, and he finds the tank car, and he goes down inside it and steals a computer tape, which he then brings to Norman Fell, who's an electronics expert who used to work for NASA, and says, "Can you please analyze this for me?" Well, he's reluctant to do it, but he doesn't believe in UFOs or anything, but he eventually agrees and starts to analyze the tape. Then Nancy Wickwire starts, David Vincent is seeing Laura Devon and dating her, and Nancy Wickwire finds out about this, and she starts blackmailing Laura Devon, saying that she can tell her, some awful things about her father, and she can make them public if she doesn't cooperate. And she wants her to spy on Vincent for her. And the secret, it turns out, is that Ed Begley had stolen a process by which he could turn a dry oil well into a productive one from one of his partners, and the partner went bankrupt and killed himself. And the public doesn't know that. So she agrees to go along with Nancy Wickwire, who's an invader, and she doesn't know that at the time, though. And apparently they've threatened her. She's failed a couple of times. They threatened that if she doesn't succeed this time, they're going to kill her. So she's desperate, and she's using Laura Devon to spy on Vincent. Finds out about that he's taken this computer tape to Norman Fell. They go after Fell, though. His younger brother actually has the tape and is going to bring it to Vincent, and the aliens kill his younger brother. Now he's really upset, too, and he wants to get them and vows to help Vincent. And they are going to contact that. He figures out what the computer tape is it's a flight plan for a UFO landing. And they figure they're going to do this in a couple of days. So they're going to tip off NASA about it and have them show up while the UFO is landing. Well, the aliens get wind of the plot through Nancy Wickwire because Laura Devon, reports to her to save her father's life, basically, and her own as well. Vincent tells her to go to Mexico and just pick a flight at the airport and just get on it and not tell anybody where she's going. but she's intercepted and isn't able to do that. Um, they're using her as well to kind of blackmail Vincent, and she somehow finds they're concealing her in the tank car. Of course, when he takes Ed Begley out to see the tank car, it's not the same. It's an old wreck, and there's nothing inside it at all. So he doesn't believe him now, and he goes off to Mexico on a business trip, and they take his daughter Laura Devon into the tank car, and they're holding her as sort of ransom to get back this computer tape. Vincent reluctantly brings it back to them, and then he manages to kill the two aliens. They demand that he hand over a camera that had some film of the tank car too, so he has to give that up, and they destroy it. And then he manages to wrestle a gun away from one of the invaders and kills them. Laura Devon is exposed to radiation inside the tank car, and she ultimately dies, unfortunately. And now Vincent's really pissed off. But the invaders have tipped off their friends, and they stop the saucer from landing before NASA. As NASA shows up, there's nobody there. So he's frustrated. A very good, very well written episode, partly written by the great science fiction writer Theodore Sturgeon, also partly by the other writer was John W. Block. So it's co-written. Very well done. A really excellent episode. Great acting, great direction, great editing. Really, really excellent. Great music score. Music score was really eerie. It was done by Dominic Frontieri, who people may know from The Outer Limits. And really, in fact, he wrote part of the score for The Outer Limits, but wasn't able to use it. Another great episode that I like was called The Innocent. And in this one, it stars Dabney Coleman is an Air Force officer, and he stumbles upon a man trying to break into secure files at an airbase. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the guy tries to run away, and he shoots him, and he disappears. He glows red and vanishes. So now he knows about the invaders, too. He informs David Vincent about a guy who's up in Maine, claims that he killed an invader and stole his weapon, the weapon that gives people the hemorrhage, the disc, and is hiding it. Invaders show up, and they are disguised as lawyers, and they claim that to the guy's wife that he has inherited a great deal of money, and they need to meet him and have him sign it. Well, the wife doesn't believe them, and meanwhile, David Vincent has contacted this guy and said, don't believe these people. They're not who they seem to be. And the guy says, I know that, and he's hiding out, and he's reluctant to help. He thinks Vincent's an invader at first. He was reluctant to cooperate with him, but eventually does. Situation develops where they kill a couple of invaders and they flee, but the invaders capture his wife and his son and threaten them if they don't turn themselves in. So Vincent and the man turn themselves in, and Michael Rennie, who plays a character called Mr. Nexus, takes Vincent aboard a saucer and says they're going to take him on a brief flight. And they strap him into a seat. They take him on a flight to somewhere in the Coachella Valley in California, where Vincent was originally planning to start a kind of a planned community as the architect of it. And he was going to create a dam and build this city, and they're working on it. And he's credited as the architect. He meets one of his friends who was lame. He was born crippled, and he's been cured by the invaders who say that their science is that much more advanced that they could cure him, their medical science. And he also meets up with his former fiancee, played by the beautiful Catherine Justice, a blue-eyed redhead. And she starts traveling around and says, we can be together again, and isn't it great? And he says, wait a minute, something's wrong here. My friend David, he died 2 years ago, and you left me. You went to England and got married. And she starts screaming, Nexus is not working. And he wakes up back on the spaceship, and it turns out that it was all a trick. They had hypnotized him, and they tried to convince him to cooperate with them. And since it doesn't work, they decide they're going to get him drunk, and they put him in the car with the man who had stolen the disc, which they've taken back now, and they're going to push him off basically a cliff. They knock him out, and they head the car out over the cliff, and Vincent wakes up at the last minute, grabs the guy out of the car, and aims it at the invaders, and it strikes them and kills them. So they're thwarted narrowly. But it's really, I thought that was really a good episode. Another two-parter, which I liked, is the only two-parter that they did. It's called Summit Meeting, Parts 1 and Part 2. And that also stars William Wyndham in a great role as an industrialist named Michael Tressiter, who has become aware of the fact that invaders seem to be messing with his business, and he doesn't like it. And he meets with Vincent at a project and tells him that there's this summit meeting that very few people know about. That there's been an increase in radiation in the atmosphere, and the invaders claim that they have a chemical, which I think they call something like XR7, and they're going to launch it in a rocket, and it's going to dissipate the radiation. But they want to do it at a meeting of like all the world leaders, and they're going to hold it at this top secret location called URAC, which is apparently sort of a stand-in for NATO. And they meet at this top secret mountainside facility. The facility is real, and it was very interesting. They had this elevator that goes down into a sub level. And I think that elevator was at least the exterior scenes was actually real as well. I don't know what the facility was. It's probably just a set, but it was well done. And Diana Hyland meets with Vincent before he goes, and she is the secretary to one of the key people at the meeting, and she's also an invader, and he finds that out fairly quickly. But she disagrees with this plan, and because she disagrees with the plan, she's going to, just for this limited purpose, she's going to help Vincent defeat the invaders. And she says, I'm doing this one thing because I don't agree with this decision, but don't trust me. I'm not your friend. I'm not really your ally. I'm just doing this because it's in our mutual benefit. That was interesting. And she played that character, whose name is Ellie Markham, very well. And I thought that if they had continued the series, it would have been interesting to see her again, because they leave her fate open-ended. She's not killed at the end. They go to this meeting, and they ultimately, Michael Rennie again plays an alien, only this time he's the consort to the head of the organization, who doesn't know that he's an invader, and he's telling him that they're going to cure the radiation, etc. Well, what they really intend to do is to kill all the world leaders with toxic gas. That's what's actually in the missile that they're going to launch. And through the help of Ellie Markham and also the Michael Tressiter, the William Wyndham character, they defeat the plot, and the missile explodes in the silo and kills some people, including some innocent humans, but the world leaders are saved. And at the end of the episode, Ellie Markham says, I'm glad I was able to help you with this, but the next time you meet me, don't trust me. He said, I didn't trust you this time. She says, what do you mean? He says, well, if you had done anything to betray me, I would have killed you. And she said, well, we think very much alike then. And they leave it there. They both survived, but he doesn't ultimately meet her again. The series got canceled after 43 episodes. There are a lot of other really great episodes. The Life Seekers, starring the wonderful Barry Morse and Diana Muldaur, presents the idea that there are some invaders who don't agree with the invasion plan. They are trying to stop the other invaders, and Vincent convinced Vincent to help him, though of course he's skeptical at the beginning. They prove their worth by actually killing a couple of the invaders, and so he decides to help them. They actually escape in a saucer at the end of the episode. So again, there's possibly some hope that maybe this faction might be able to stop what's going on. Very good series, very dark, very creepy, very atmospheric. There's some terrific acting by basically everybody involved. Great direction, great writing. Although a lot of the writers on the plan, the series, people like Meyer Dolinsky, hadn't actually written a lot of science fiction, and this was their first show. But, they did a good job with what they were given. I highly recommend it. And so until next week, I hope you enjoy The Invaders, a Quinn Martin production.